I've been talking about it since the summertime. I said Stephon Diggs didn't want to be there.
All right, we're here for episode 8 of the Views from the Grab a Lot podcast. I am joined by my co-host Trent, who is normally on here, and I'm also joined by a guest, Ryan from BufSportsTalk podcast. He's a great guy. We're gonna just kind of dissect the Bills draft class here. Uh, we're gonna briefly touch base on some of the small veteran signings. I'm excited. This has been something in the works for a while. I went on Ryan's podcast before the drafts to talk about some of the picks that we could be making, some of the prospects we were interested in. We'll touch base on some of it because some of it did come true. So I'm going to just throw out the first question, and I'm going to give it to Ryan just to start us off. You can introduce yourself, and we'll go with it from there. So the first question I did have was, what type of rookie season did you guys project for Keon Coleman? Ryan, what do you got for us?
Yeah, first off, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Of
I had to
course, of
return the
course.
favor because you came on our podcast and gave some
Absolutely.
great analysis. So, I guess what kind of season do I foresee out of Keon Coleman? The first thing I said, and it's kind of the picture I've had in my mind since we've drafted him, is I feel like we could get anywhere from 500 yards, 5 touchdowns to 800 yards, 8 touchdowns. But I think the sky's also the limit for this kid. You look at the round this wide receiver room, you see Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, now Dalton Kincaid kind of in the mix too. And there's a ton of opportunity. There's a ton of targets to go around with the departures of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. And uh, like I said, the sky's the limit. If he works into a big role here, it could be a big year one for him. Or I could see him being the perfect complementary wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. He's versatile, so he can kind of work inside and out, just like Shakir and Samuel. He'll be that kind of contested catch down the field red zone guy, and he'll be a strong blocker too. So no matter what, I think he'll have an impact. I really like this pick, and like I said, I think you'll get as a baseline. I'd be willing to put it out there. I think you'll get at least 500 yards and 5 touchdowns out of this kid this rookie season.
Yeah, I kind of went with something similar. I want to get Trent's take on this just because I haven't really heard much on him from the Keon Coleman front at all. Just been
Yeah.
hard to talk. So, Trent, what do you think of kind of rookie season we'll see out of Keon?
Well, I want to start off by saying me and my dad, we were breaking down all the wide receivers for the draft, and we're like, like Brian Thomas. We were personally hoping the Bills would trade for Farmer to get Roma Duze. But we were saying, like, one receiver we probably don't want is Keon Coleman. And sure enough, Bills picked Keon Coleman. But I think, well, really, honestly, I could see a lot of like, I think if you're looking at like a baseline for Keon Coleman, it should be Gabe Davis's rookie season. That should be where we start. Because anything below that, because in all reality, this is the Bills' first round pick. It wasn't in the first round. They made us stay up till midnight to watch them trade back twice. But this is the Bills' first round pick. And he should be producing like a number one wide receiver. Now, I think there's an interesting facet, to this is that we were talking about this on our last episode about how, Joe Brady style of offense, Curtis Samuel. Well, if you go back and look at that, that is DJ Moore's worst season ever. And that's primarily because I think a lot of Joe Brady's offense is that he does not use a typical number one wide receiver. It's more like a wide receiver by committee. And Keon Coleman is another guy who a lot of people thought was a prototypical slot wide receiver. Or not prototypical, I should say like a big slot wide receiver. His athletic score is about the same as Gabe Davis. Is just a little bit on the high end on some facets of it. But what I thought was interesting was the gauntlet drill. Infamously, the one where Taron Johnson got beamed in the head with it. He had the second fastest gauntlet run. And the gauntlet runs, to me, is a little more interesting than the 40 because the 40 is straight line speed. It's just pure, unadulterated. Right. How far can you go? The shuttle is how quick can you turn and can you catch? Perfect on the catching and second fastest time. So it tells me that he's got fluid movement in him. And I think honestly, we're looking at like if Gabe Davis could unlock number one ability. I don't think he'll be a true number one. I don't think he'll ever reach the height Stefon Diggs ever did in Buffalo. But as far as a wide receiver Josh Allen can throw to, he certainly should be your top in the top 3 wide receivers and probably should get a good chunk of targets, at least big targets.
Yeah, so
I didn't want to ask you something, Ben. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, okay, because I haven't had the chance to, break down some other podcasts, but one of the things I did find interesting was pre-draft, I'd watched some Florida State games. I hadn't really thought twice of it about Keon Coleman. And what I found interesting was the embedded where he broke down like throws that were underthrown to him. And I saw a whole series of clips on YouTube, or not, it might have been YouTube, Twitter, YouTube, one of the two, where it's a low light reel of Keon Coleman having to adjust to footballs that are just constantly underthrown. And it really looked like Florida State just didn't have much else for him to do other than he's bigger than everyone else. Let's just try to out-muscle him. And then obviously he would get double teamed on and underthrown. That's not a good combination. Yeah. So I was wondering if you see stuff like that, and what you think about the fact that, do you think that how much of an adjustment Keon Coleman is going to have to an offense that might ask him to run some different routes? Or do you think that we're looking at like a Gabe Davis where it's like 4 or 5 routes, but he'll run those 4 or 5 routes as good as anyone?
Yeah, I actually think he talked about this a little bit on Embedded, because he talked about how at Michigan State, like it's a much more pro level offense, and he, was reading leverages, adjusting his zones. I felt like he was more prepared to be a professional football player at Michigan State. And then at Florida State, he was kind of like that backyard football wide receiver, go up and get it, be our Randy Moss. And, that's fine in college football. It's, obviously it translates significantly different in the pros because, not everybody can do that. So I think there will be a bit of a learning curve. How big, I don't know, because, he is going to have an entire offseason now with NFL level coaching. He's going to have Josh Allen as his quarterback. That itself will make the transition a lot easier. So to answer your question, I don't think he's going to be like Gabe in terms of like, oh, he's only got those few good routes. I think he might be like that in the first 2 months of the season, but I think he'll start to pick it up as the game goes. I just think NFL level coaching can really help him work on that kind of stuff. So that's how I'd answer that. And as far as what I think he'll do in his rookie season, and much similar to Ryan, I think that baseline of 500, 600 yards is very good. I project more than that. I see a season where he's got maybe 55 catches, 750 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Nothing like gonna blow you away, but it's good. It's really good. And, I think the biggest thing, he's gonna have a lot of targets. So that production, I think, is gonna be high in that. There's no true starting caliber X on the roster right now. And I think Keon kind of solidifies that role. He satisfies that role. And I think that's the kind of season we'll see out of him. I really hope that he just kind of shuts everybody up and is amazing, 1,000-yard receiver. I want to hope that happens. Do I think it happens? Probably not. So I expect a good but not great season for him. And I think we're all kind of on the same page for that. And then I'll go to question 2 that kind of leads into that. If you want to add something, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. One thing that should be noted, and it was shown on one of the hype videos, everyone puts out a hype receiver. Hey, like, look at this new receiver we got. his routes, the sky report on his routes are correct. He's very fluid for like an out route, a seam route, like very fluid for a guy his size. The problem he's going to have is it takes about 5 years in a Jake break to slow down for a curl route, which that could be a thing that, with NFL coaching. And honestly, one of the very best ever to do slant curls and comeback routes is a Buffalo alumni and Stevie Johnson with a basketball background, Keon Coleman. So I'm kind of hoping that, I think we talked about previous podcast about Khalil Shakir, working out with Eric Moles, is that hopefully, maybe a alumni like Stevie Johnson can come in. I mean, he already said he's called Andre Reed. I mean, I think truly what's going to hold Keon Coleman back is that he can't run a curl route, but he can run a lot of routes really good for a guy that's big and has good enough speed.
Right. That kind of leads me into the second question. We're going to do 2 on Keon, and then we'll kind of touch base on the other guys because I think the Keon talk's going to be the talk of the offseason. He's going to have the spotlight. But this is kind of early to ask this, I think, but it's a question I wanted to throw out there just to see what you think of Keon's potential. And do you think he can be that long-term guy? Now, I'm not saying, do you think he can replace Stefon Diggs? I think that's unfair. But do you think he can be the team's number 1 wide receiver for, 5-6 years? He doesn't have to have the same level of production as Stefon Diggs, but good production, a Pro Bowl level. And I know Pro Bowl is kind of a loose term because of how bad it is now and how bad that process is. But you know what I mean. What I mean.
All-Pro. I think All-Pro would be a little more apt.
Yeah, like second team All-Pro guy. Yeah, Ryan, what do you think? Do you think he has the potential of being that guy? I mean, I know it's a lot of boom or bust with him, but he's also a player that, is in a very good landing spot.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's something I alluded to on one of our episodes. I think, can he be a number 1 wide receiver in the sense of Stefon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, or Jamar Chase, some of the upper echelon players at the position? They run every route well. They win in multiple ways. No, I don't think he'll ever live up to that. I think that there is a development path there. He is 20 years old. Maybe he could get there. But I see him more as like your DK Metcalf, your AJ Brown, a guy who's going to win in maybe 3 or 4 routes. He's going to win at the catch point. He's going to win after the catch. We see the hurdling, we see the juking. He's a great athlete. Obviously, you talked about basketball. And he's a willing blocker who's got like an alpha mentality. So I think there's all the tools there. The biggest thing comes down to that route tree that we've already talked about a few separate times, but at the very least, I think he could develop into, your kind of DK Metcalf, AJ Brown. And I say at the very least, but those guys are debatably top 10 wide receivers in the league. And, he'll never be that Diggs. He'll never be that CD, but I think that he very well could be a big bodied receiver who turns into something special. And I think the second thing I'd point to quickly is, I don't know if he needs to be. You talked about Joe Brady and how he really didn't use DJ Moore as a number 1 wide receiver. And you look, the Bills have a first next season. They have 2 seconds. They have a third. Maybe they look to add another guy who could be a long-term player in this wide receiver corps next to Khalil Shakir. And, I think everybody really likes the idea of Curtis Samuel, but it really, makes a ton of sense to move on from him in 2026 or 2027 when he's nearing his 30s and you can get away with maybe cutting him, and we'll see what he turns into. But the overall point being is Keon doesn't have to be that number 1 wide receiver for you long term, but I think he is a guy that very well could develop into that. Absolutely.
100%. And I just want to say, like, I completely agree with the AJ Brown, DK Metcalf kind of comparison. He might not be the same exact player, but he's going to be, I think at his best, he's going to be in that second tier of buckets, a bucket of receivers. And it just, I like Keon a lot. I agree with the blocking. He's a very strong player. He's exactly what the Bills want. A tough, good kid. Like, that's what the Bills love. I'm going to turn it over to Trent. What do you think about the long-term potential of Keon?
Well, I think we all hope that it's a long term. We talked about draft picks and everything. I'll touch on that a little bit later about a future picking the Bills did about that. But I think really what we're looking at here with Keon Coleman is he should be your number 1 ideally he's going to be a number one because you spent a first round pick on him. He should be your number one guy going forward. At minimum, he's going to be here for 3 to 4 years. And if he's not, then we might be talking about a new GM drafting because this draft, and we can get into this a little later about how I feel about overall in this draft. But I think he's going to be here for a long time. Whether or not Curtis Samuel is here for a long time, Khalil Shakir is here for a long time, who knows? Because this might be the point of Josh Allen's career where it's a little more of a revolving cast of characters. It's no longer, stability. But I'm hoping that he's really good because I actually saw something today about how, Sammy Watkins, right? We all know the catastrophic flame out that was Sammy Watkins. All the skills and all the tools were there, and it just didn't work. And with Keon, it seemed like maybe he doesn't have the athletic gift that some of these other wide receivers do, but it seems like he's got a good head, very well balanced. He made Michigan State's basketball team, which, if you know anything about college basketball, you know that Tom Izzo is a very strict coach, very hard play for him. The fact that he was able to play 2 sports at Michigan State kind of shows that this guy's got a good head on his shoulders, and I think that's one thing that Bills value, and I think that's partially why I hope that he's a long-term fixture in Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and I also want to go back to what Ryan said about Curtis Samuel being like a two-year kind of placeholder, and I love that. Like, have him hold down the fort for a couple years, and then you can, like, to touch base on the future picks, you can use one of those picks to take another receiver. I feel like people have strong feelings about them not double dipping in this class. We could probably get into that a bit later.
Yeah.
But I mean, hey, I did so much work on receivers pre-draft. Troy Franklin, Malachi Corley, like then the list goes on and on. Like Keon was probably the guy I focused the least amount on because I just feel like in the big group of receivers there was, he just kind of got lost in the mix for me. So it's funny how this all worked out and they took Keon, and I had to just do a ton of research on him because he was probably the receiver I knew the least about. I knew like the general stuff about him, but I had to dig much deeper on him. So it's funny how we got to the point we're at. But I'll lead us into here. I'm going to take the lead on this next question because this is something I'm a bit passionate about, and it is the 2nd round pick in Cole Bishop. And now this is something I talked about with Ryan on his podcast as being a potential fit at pick 60 because of a lot of the similarities to Micah Hyde. And much like Keon, he's a very fluid mover. Just really, really like Cole Bishop. And so the question is, what is your grade? What is your analysis on him? And I guess I'll just start here. I gave it an A-. I just feel like he's an incredible matchup piece. He's not going to be someone you necessarily need to start right away because I know how the Bills are with their rookies. They like to ease him into the role. Cole Bishop doesn't have to start right away, but he can still have an impact right away, but not starting because you can trot out Edwards, Rapp, and then Bishop as your third. You can use him in matchup pieces against tight ends. Sometimes against, slower receivers, he can match up against those guys. He can blitz. He's got really good size. And again, much like Keon and Trent, you alluded to this, the Bills love like just smart players. They like guys who are smart, competitive, and that's what Cole Bishop is. He, to me, fits their DNA. Obviously, they tried to trade up for him, as you saw in the episode of Embedded. So they value this player a lot. And I feel like that belief in itself just shows how much they really think this can be a home run pick for them. And again, this is a team that has had a very high hit rate on defense. And I know Kyrie Williams is probably the only exception, but man, this is a very talented defensive staff and a front office has a knack for finding guys in the secondary. So I'm really excited about this pick. And it's probably my favorite pick. Let's go to Trent. What do you think about Cole Bishop?
So I forgot you wanted grades on these picks. I'll give Keon Coleman. Initially gave it a C+ because I was annoyed, but then he had that interview where he talked about his Macy's jacket, and that instantly improved it a whole letter grade. So I'll give that pick a B+, and I'll give the same grade to this, a B+, and that Honestly, what I saw was a Jordan Poyer comp, not as much of Micah Hyde comp, because a lot of Jordan Poyer's game is, a box safety, a guy who can run downhill and be involved in the run game. And like we said, he's a smart guy, a team captain, 5th-year guy, lots of, sportsmanship awards for him. And even, he knew Dalton Kincaid and was kind of familiar that the Bills were very much interested in him. I think he even said, like, he didn't really pay all that much attention to other playbooks because he knew the Bills were going to try and get him. I really hope that he starts. I know the Bills' tension with rookies. If you want to go back and listen, you can hear my Dorian Williams rant. But no, I hope that he supplants one of Taylor Rapp or Mike Edwards, because those two were backups for a reason. They weren't starting caliber. Whether or not they start for the Buffalo Bills, interesting. But I think this is a pick that very much I was surprised, honestly, once they made that pick. I was surprised they didn't go get another safety. I figured that they had such a success of Hyde and Poyer being in lockstep that I figured they would have wanted, somebody like that. Now it's interesting also, there's still some slots on the roster left, and I would not be surprised if Micah Hyde came back like late in training camp as a reserve safety on the Buffalo Bills, just as hey, he's here and available for us if we need him. Like almost like a AJ Klein of save our phone number in your contacts type of deal. But Sal, I remember Sal in draft night said he probably can play special teams in college. I hope that he plays, but I think he'll see a lot of special teams action this year, unfortunately.
Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna flip it a little bit here. I had a B- on it. Ben, I know you were very high on him. You talked about him on our podcast, and personally, I had more of like a round 3, round 4 grade on him. It just comes down to, like, I like some of the other safeties in this class better. When you talk about Tyler Nubin, Javon Bullard, I also like Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. It just really came down to value for me. But I see the vision that comes with Cole Bishop, and I can like him as a player. And I say all this, I give my B-, but I just know that McDermott's probably going to turn him into a dog. I mean, all these we have all these great defensive backs, and like anyone we took, at the end of the day, I'd say that's a solid pick. I just go B- with the value, but you get a rangy defensive back with good size who can play in the box, cover out of the slot. They kind of alluded to that. I think the biggest knock on him was just like his coverage skills overall. I know PFF had a pretty low coverage grade on him, and some of the other stats like completion percentage when targeted, passer rating when targeted. But when we were on the podcast originally before the draft, I said, give me an athletic safety who can play sideline to sideline, can play in the box, can make tackles. And I know Sean McDermott will teach them to cover and will teach them how to read plays from a defensive standpoint and turn them into a good player. So I give it a B-, but at the end of the day, I like the pick. I think Cole Bishop will turn into a good player.
All right. Yeah, so that I guess that wraps it up on Cole Bishop. A player I really like. But this next guy, go ahead, Trent. You want to add something?
I do want to say, Ben, you can recall when we were talking draft night that I kept saying they were going to pick Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. Like I was as soon as they trade back, they're going to pick him. Like that's the most Bills pick ever. So it's been a year. Everyone said the wide receiver on the white corner who's going to play safety. But no, I think Cole Bishop checks off a box of a guy who's playing safety in Miami right now. So
right. Yeah. I just think there's a good chance he succeeds. Like you guys said, the defensive staff we have in place, it's going to be hard for him not to hit. So we'll touch base on the next defensive player they took in round 3, which was DeWayne Carter, defensive lineman from Duke. Again, a very good character, strong player. And I'll give this one to Ryan, just because this is a player I'm a little torn on. I'm not too sure what I think. So I want to get your guys' opinion out of the way first, and then I'll kind of go. So Ryan, what did you think, and what kind of grade did you give for DeWayne Carter?
Yeah, it's definitely not the flashiest pick that the Bills could make, an interior defensive tackle in the third round. But I give it a B overall. I think this is a guy who'll come in, instant impact player. I know he's older, logged 5 years in college, can play all three downs, like you said. He's a good culture guy, was a captain on Duke for a long time. I just think you got really good value here. I had a I had a day three grade on him. So to take him now in early, kind of late day two. Sorry about that. Late day two, basically almost a fourth round pick. I really like. It's a guy that'll help out Ed Oliver. It's a guy that'll help out Daquan Jones, log a lot of snaps for you. And I think, the thing that really made this pick for me is they put out the embedded, and he had the coldest line, I think, the entire draft. He asked Brandon Bean, what took you so long? So I just think, DeWayne Carter, I don't think he'll ever be a player that is flashy. Will be one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league, but I think he'll be a very solid player for the Bills for at least the duration of his rookie contract.
All right, Trent, what do you got for us?
Well, remember we were talking about Brandon Bean pick, Sean McDermott pick. I want to guess what this guy was when in his college career. How many times he was captain of a football team?
How many?
Just give me a number.
I think it was
Three-time
four.
captain.
Okay, three.
Three? That's still a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and all second team all ACC. I actually watched a couple of Duke games, especially the one against Notre Dame, and you notice how much of a disruptor he was inside. Honestly, is kind of a guy that they're looking for because they didn't re-sign Jordan Phillips, or Jordan Phillips retired or something. But they like playing with rotation, and this is a guy that can easily slot into that rotation really well as a complement, like you said, to Ed Oliver. It's a depth piece. It's nothing that I think he'll carve out a nice little career. Maybe he might be a guy that we try to retain. Maybe he outperforms his spot in the Bills and ends up on another team. But I think he's going to be a solid piece in the rotation. Honestly, at first I was like, why'd they pick him? And then I remember like watching a few Duke games. Like, okay, this guy's pretty good. So I'll just give this a B minus because it's nothing really I'm upset about. It's what they need. They need depth, and can't go wrong with depth in the third round. So high floor, it can be plug and play right away, which I think is what they're looking for.
Right. I give it a B. Again, not the sexiest pick in the world. But the part of me was like, I might want more of a starter in round 3. Then I'm like, okay, he's probably gonna log a lot of snaps anyways, so it'll be fine. And this was a guy I was actually extremely high on during the pre-draft process, but a lot of that was due to his tape in 2022, not his tape in 2023. You just look at the pure numbers, and I usually don't do this, but his sack total kind of reflects his value. 11 sacks in 2022, 3.5 in 2023. And this player reminds me a lot of a guy up in Seattle, and Jerron Reed, who was a first-round pick, who's kind of like up and down his whole career, but always been a steady, solid number 2, number 3 defensive tackle on your roster. And, to me, it makes perfect sense. You got Daquan climbing up in age. You always need a guy next to Ed. We know who Ed is. We know he's the alpha dominant. He's essentially the best pass rusher on the roster right now. And, they needed to have a guy and a plan in place behind it, because when you lose a player like Ed Oliver to injury, you can't replace him, but you need to have somebody who could do a lot of the same things that Ed does, and that's what DeWayne Carter is. He can disrupt, and like Trent said, he's very violent with his hands. He's a smart player, and again, the team leadership, that's a big thing, and I think it's overlooked in a lot of of the scouts, Twitter scouts, or whatever you want to call them. And it's something you can't really put a grade on, but I think there's value to be had in a player like that, because it's important. You want to bring in good people in the building, and you want to bring in good human beings, and that's what DeWayne is. And again, he's a player I really liked in the pre-draft process through the 2022 tape. But again, the only reason I didn't give it higher grade is he did regress a little bit in 2023. And I might want a different player there, but again, you can't do wrong with it. So I give
No,
it a solid B.
I'm also glad, Ben, that you mentioned the violent hands thing, and that's a thing that also when we talk about people who want to be armchair quarterbacks like we do, um, one of the things with linemen is, do they separate with their hands, or are they a body guy? A lot of guys in college get away with being body guys because they might just have some size or strength or age, difference on the guy that's going across from them. That's how they can beat him. DeWayne Carter being a violent hands guy really reflects well to the NFL, because that means if he's got, if he can get hands on, paws on first, he's now set the edge. He's set control of how this play is going to go, which I think is very important. It's one of the things that I think for a while the Bills kind of struggled to figure out. It's one of the weaknesses, honestly, of Jordan Phillips, is that's why he was a poor run defender. He wasn't, for as big as he wasn't really a paws guy. He was a body guy.
Okay, so that leads us into our fifth question, which is a pick that me and Trent briefly discussed off air. We both came into an agreement on. So I'm gonna go to Ryan first, just because me and Trent share the same opinion. But Ray Davis was picked in round 4. The Bills answered a need they had. So what'd you think? What'd you think of the Ray Davis pick?
Yeah, I mean, my immediate reaction was like, what the hell? Braylon Allen was still on the board. Isaiah Correndo was still on the board. And I feel like you have to separate who the player is and what they contribute immediately to what this team needs. And I think this team, the more that I think about this pick, needs a guy like Ray Davis. He's an instant impact player, kind of similar to DeWayne Carter. I think you get a guy who's a 3-down running back. He'll run between the tackles, will run outside the tackles, but also pass block. He'll catch the ball. And that's the perfect guy to have behind James Cook. I think that he very well could be the Bills' 3rd down back. He'll be your goal line guy. He'll be your short yardage guy. And it's kind of that Latavius Murray role, and it's an upgrade in that sense. I think Joe Brady wants to run the ball more too. He had the 2nd highest run rate since he took over. And I think that this is a guy who will sit behind James Cook right away and provide, kind of that Latavius Murray role. But as the season goes on, he could kind of cut into James Cook's snaps. James Cook is, I think, a top 10 running back in this league next season, but I think it speaks to Ray Davis's versatility, and his ability that he could take some of those snaps away.
Yeah, I wanted to go here, if you don't mind, Trent. One of my favorite YouTubers who covers
Yeah, I got to
NFL.
clear up my hearing to make sure I heard right.
Okay. One of my favorite YouTubers, that franchise guy who covers a lot of the NFL stuff, kind of described this pick in the best way he possibly could. It's like eating your vegetables. You just got to do it. You know, it. I love that reference, just because, man, there were some guys I really, really wanted that were on the board. Isaac Guerendo, Braylon Allen, Audric Estime. There were so many running backs I preferred over Ray Davis. I was just not a huge fan out of him, just because the upside for me really wasn't there where I liked it. And if you're going to take a second running back, I want it to be a guy who can potentially take over when James Cook needs a second contract. If you have that kind of second guy, like, I like James Cook a lot. I love him. I think he's awesome. Do I want to pay him? Absolutely not. I will stand on that hill and I will die on that hill. But so if you're going to take a running back, round 4, which, running backs have such a high hit rate in the draft anyways, you want it to be a guy who can, yes, contribute on all 3 downs, which Ray Davis does, but I want a little bit more explosiveness, a little bit more juice. It's kind of the thunder to James Cook's lightning. He can do that, but I think Braylon Allen, Guerendo can do that to a much further extent. Again, he's tough, he's physical, he can run in between the tackles, and he's sort of like, he can also catch the ball. And I think a lot of fantasy owners aren't going to be happy with Ray Davis this year, because I feel like he's going to take a lot of the goal line work, and he's going to be like a guy that has, I don't know, 450 yards with like 7 touchdowns. Um, just nothing crazy, but they don't really have another running back on the roster that can fill that void. So he's fine as our running back too. I would have liked other guys, but I give it a C plus. It's fine. But again, like I said, there's guys I would have preferred. Trent is like spazzing out over here. So I'm gonna turn it over to you. You did not like this pick at all, and I want you to
No,
explain why. And you
no.
probably don't like our takes, and that's fine, but I want to see what you have to say because you're laughing over there, and I need to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I think this pick of the analysis of this pick's going to turn me into the Joker. First of all, never pick a running back ever when you have a quarterback. Running back picks are for when you have like Tua as your quarterback, or you just don't have a quarterback. Brock Purdy, like a guy that you're like, okay, we need all the players we can get. No, don't pick running back. First of all, our our second best running back last year was a dude the Jets said, you know what, this guy sucks. We don't want him on our team, and he ended up being pretty good. Ty Johnson. I feel like this whole discussion, we forgot Ty Johnson's on this team. It does a lot of what yeah, I'm not even going to say the guy's name right. Ray Davis does. Because I mean Ray Davis, yeah. All right. I'm gonna give this pick a D plus because I can't separate the player from the pick. Because if you're going to do a running back pick, he's got to be something that's like extremely off the chart of what you don't have. James Cook, speed guy, cannot catch a ball to save his life. If you were dropping a kid out of a building, he'd probably drop it. Ty Johnson, a good overall running back. Does everything pretty good. Nothing off the charts spectacular. Ray Davis, kind of a lot of the same. He was a high usage running back. A lot of run on those tires. And I personally not a fan of picking a running back at all. I don't think the Buffalo Bills should be picking running backs. To top it all off, they picked a guy who's just okay. Like he's a guy that if you had no running backs, like if Ty Johnson and Dalvin Cook got food poisoning every week, he'd be okay, fill the role, does the job. Like you said, vegetables. He's the side. He's like side vegetables that you're like, okay, it comes with a meal. I'll just take it. Why not? You're not ordering it because it has the asparagus on the side. It just the steak comes with asparagus, so you just take it because you can't sub it out for something else. But no, it's incredibly like when we want to be mad at the Bills and frustrated. Sometimes it feels like we're just stuck in 1998 when we picked stuff. Going another running back when we had Ty Johnson, and they picked up a running back or two in undrafted free agency, and it's just like I don't think unless you're getting something that's just off the charts remarkable, using a fourth round pick on a running back just seems frivolous. Like it's like picking a punter. Like yeah, that punter probably could be really good, and it could be pinning everyone down the 10-yard line. I'm sure that's great. Don't use a fourth round pick on them. I feel the same way. If you're not a blazing fast running back, or you're not a powerful Mike Allstott style running back, just an okay overall running back. Like honestly, the more I think about this dude, he's even wearing his number, Fred Jackson. But Fred Jackson was a guy that Marv Levy found in NFL Europe. Which feels like a waste of assets, really, to do this.
I agree with you on like the whole philosophy of like just not wanting to take a running back. My only counter argument to that is the rookie contract that comes with it, because you get a few years of a very low salary versus, if you want, I know there might be like 200 Ray Davises in the NFL, right? But you're also getting a guy who I don't know how long the fourth round rookie contract is. I don't follow the terms for that, but I do know you're going to have at least a few years of cost controlled play behind James Cook, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Could have used the pick on someone else? Absolutely. Like you said, it's probably not the best use of an asset because I feel like this running back class was deep enough where you could probably taken a guy in a sixth or seventh round. It would have been fine. Or Frank Gore Jr. they signed as a UDFA. Like to me, yeah, I didn't love it, and I think a lot of people haven't talked about it just because, it's like whatever, fourth round pick, but it's something I wasn't a huge fan of. So that
If
leads
I
me to
could
the
just
next pick. You go
Sorry,
ahead, Brian. Yeah,
if
yeah.
I could just butt in quick too, because I came in very optimistic about this. I will say two things. First off, the age too. He's actually 2 months younger than James Cook, which is crazy to think about. Um, so it's a guy who's born in 1999, one of the few players in this draft. He's 24, turning 25. And Ben, I liked how you said there's nothing really past the rookie deal here. Like it's not your answer after Cook, and you're really just picking a player who the ceiling is probably he'll be the RB2, the complement to Cook. And it feels like it's a very much of like a we're contending now pick when your whole offseason has been we're getting rid of all of this past core to rebuild. It's not a rebuilding pick. It's a we're contending now pick, and it doesn't make a ton of sense if you look at it through that lens. So sorry to cut you
Yeah.
off, but
No, you're good. I agree with everything you just said. So, this next pick actually it's completely flipping the script, I think, because I love this next pick, who I think was probably the best value they had in the draft. And I know Trent's probably going to talk about it, but he likes those guys who play in either Georgia or Wisconsin, those big, tough, beefy guys in the middle. And Sedrick
You know,
Van Pran,
boys.
he is that. He was somebody I had a third round grade on, somebody who I thought was a lot closer to the guys that were drafted in the second round, like Zach Frazier. I love the pick because yes, Connor McGovern is your starting center this year, right? That's fine. But if that project fails, I think there is potential that you have your starting center waiting in the wings. And Cedric Van Pran, he kind of got lost in the shuffle that Georgia is because they're so dominant all the time. But when you turn on the tape, this dude just beats people up. Like he mauls, he destroys people. And I want that guy in front of Josh Allen. I want that guy to go out there and lay his life on the line for Josh Allen. And that's everything you want in an offensive lineman. And that's what Cedric Van Pran is. And to get him in the fifth round, I was absolutely elated. I was at work, so I really wasn't following the board. And when they took him, like, how the hell was he still available? He's someone I easily saw that was going on day two. He goes on, the middle of day three. I thought this was a home run pick. I gave it an A. I really, really like this pick because I think there is serious potential. He can be your starting center. And I'm gonna let Trent go here. He seems excited to jump the gun here. So what do you think about this pick?
I gave the last one a D plus. I thought that pick was dumb. This pick is great. This is great value. Um, I think they gave some kind of assurance, agreements to McGovern when he came back for this year. That he would be the center. It seems he's pretty passionate about being center, want to be center. And yeah, it sounds like with the moves they made that they kind of cleared it out for him to be the center. I think this guy is your starting guard if that's the case. Like I feel so strongly about this guy. The one thing he can't do is pull, which I guess just kind of adapt to that. I mean, to be fair, center is not really a position you pull at, and it like Mitch Morse is kind of a rare exception. But one of the things with Mitch Morse that I feel like why the Bills were okay with letting him go was that he was great for the finesse run scheme that Bobby Johnson had. The power run scheme that Cromer runs, you need like if you look at Eric Wood, that's the best example. Like Eric Wood, Richie Incognito, like those days, we had some solid strength, beef, and right amount of burst in there that really made that run game potent. And I think Mitch Morse didn't have that strength in it. Sedrick Van Pran does have that strength. He does have that. The one thing he doesn't have is movement. It's a little weak, but a lot of the things that his weaknesses were are things you can coach. You can coach a guy to say, "Hey, don't let the guy come into your chest. Strike first." It's stuff that you can coach into a rookie lineman that makes me really excited that we got a guy who, I mean, saw some stuff post draft, and a lot of people, not even Bills people, are saying, hey, this guy, he was really the best value. He could be starting, soon for the Buffalo Bills. And I'm very excited. This gets an A plus. This was a great pick.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear Ryan's take on it because I didn't really we didn't really talk about offensive linemen too much. We talked about the depth guys, but we didn't mention a guy like Van-Pran because we didn't think he was going to be available on day 3. We felt like the Bills were going to address that position on day 3, but Van-Pran's name never popped up because we thought he was going earlier. So what do you think?
Yeah, I had an A on this, and I felt like the Bills had to come out of this draft with an interior offensive lineman. You lose Mitch Morse. Connor McGovern wants to move to center. That's the intention, but can he actually do it? I don't know. But you get a guy who was SEC Lineman of the Year last year, allowed 1 sack and 1 hit over 3 college seasons against SEC talent. That's about as good as it gets at the college level. And I think that he has the opportunity to develop into Josh Allen's one of his long-term guys on that offensive line. Bean kind of mentioned that this is a guy who they see as a guard and a center. So I think, as you guys have alluded to, I think he could start as early as this season. His competition's going to be La'el Collins, going to be David Edwards, guys who are more traditionally tackles. So I think that if he is the starting center or the starting guard for the Buffalo Bills on week 1, I would not be surprised at all. And who knows? Brandon Bean found Wyatt Teller in the 5th round a long time ago. Maybe this is another guy just like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope he doesn't trade him away because, man, it'd be nice to have Osiris Torrance, and a guy like him, and then obviously Dion, who's your cornerstone left tackle. You're set at line. You don't need to have this revolving door, which has felt like we've had that since Josh has been our quarterback, just like musical chairs at offensive line. Guys have been in and out. Like Morse has been there, Dawkins has been there, but every other position, left guard, right tackle, has just been moved and moved and moved. So I'm really hoping this sticks. And again, Spencer Brown is going to want to get paid soon, so you have to address offensive line. I don't know if they're going to address tackle in the draft next year, but they definitely need to come away with an interior guy, and I love this pick. So, A grades, A+ from Trent, A from me, A from Ryan. Everybody loves that pick. So that moves us on. We're going to cover 2 more picks, and then we'll touch base on 1 more after that. So not really going to give a grade on that, but we're going to give 2 more grades out. But the next one is a linebacker they took, which was Ede Olofoshio, who I haven't talked too much about because I didn't really care to cover linebackers because I feel personally I believe that we have the best linebacker room in the league. So I'm going to start with Ryan just to lead us off here, just to give us your take and your grade on Olofoshio, if I'm saying that correctly. If I'm not, I apologize, but I'm doing my best. So, Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if the Bills were going to address linebacker, we all knew they would do it late in this draft. Using I think it was a 5th round pick on this guy. I don't know if that was the greatest move, but I gave it a B+. I mean, you do need depth behind Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams. Guy who plays with speed, quickness, plays instinctually. He actually had a very similar athletic profile to Dorian Williams when you look at combine testing. And similar to Dorian, he's got a strength in coverage. So it's just another depth linebacker project who is going to give you some depth behind Milano if he were to get hurt. And we'll just see what he turns into. You get to the point now in the 5th round where you're just throwing darts at the board and seeing what sticks long term. So that's all this pick is. And if he doesn't turn it into anything, I can't hate on it too much because we're talking, I think it's like the late 5th here on a linebacker who has some good traits.
Right. And I know Trent's very passionate about the linebacker room, especially with Dorian Williams. So this is another guy added to the mix. Probably going to end up being the 4th guy on the roster, special teams guy in year 1. Matt Milano is not up there in age, but he's getting there. He's probably got a good 3-4 years left in him. But hey, Trent, what did you think of the Olofoshio pick?
First is Tyler Makavedovich. Is he still on the roster?
I think so.
Did you-
I'd have to look. Honestly, I haven't followed him. Would you
Because
know,
I don't
Ryan?
think so.
I don't know off the top of my head if he is or not. Because I didn't bother. I forgot to look. Because honestly, I was thinking in my head like, this guy just replaces Tyler. Because I'll just what's the most spot bang average I can get? I guess C+. Sure. Like just
He's not. Matakevich is not on the roster anymore. I just looked at the
okay.
hour
So,
lines, so.
okay. B-. There we go. He upgraded spot because that's the spot he's going to play. He's special teams linebacker. Like
Mhm.
they very clearly value the role, and he played a whole lot of that at Washington in addition to playing actual linebacker. I don't think he'll play actual linebacker for the Buffalo Bills because right now he's 3rd string because, like we mentioned, you got Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams. You also have that dude they signed from the Eagles, I believe. His name's escaping me.
Nick Morrow.
Yeah, Nick Morrow, who replaces Tyrell Dotson.
They also
and don't
sorry to cut
forget
you
Bailey
off.
Spector.
Yeah.
So really, he's your sixth linebacker. This is essentially this guy can also play actual football, so we don't have to call AJ Klein when he's in Cancun.
Right.
Like that's what this pick is.
And I see that you're wearing the UB hat. They actually signed UB's probably their best player, Joe Anderson, who's a UB
Joe Anderson,
Buffalo native.
On a team
they signed him.
On a UB team that was devoid of talent. He was the only one
that was
there
not very good, but I like him. He projects as like a special teams guy as well. And then they also signed Deion Jones, who we'll talk about a bit later. So they're making sure they don't have to do that again with AJ Klein and put themselves in a position, especially with a season on the line. Like, we're going to trot out a spineless defense and just say, whatever. They're not going to do that again. They're not going to make that same mistake. And I know Bean values depth and his front office values depth, so they were probably kicking themselves at the thought of having to play AJ Klein and Tyrell Dodson against Travis Kelce, which was just a disaster. And I don't even want to think about
AJ Klein covering Travis Kelce will haunt me more than anything.
Yeah, I actually was at the gym the other day and it was on the TV while I was doing my workout. And I was like, you really have to remind me of this. So yeah, a little PTSD there. So again, I give it a let's see, what grade did I give it? It's fine. It's a C+ for me. He's like a special teams linebacker. He's whatever. I would have liked them to see them use on that pick on a position they were more in need of, maybe double dip on a receiver there. But whatever. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I'll take it. So that moves us on to the last grade we'll give for a player, which was Javon Solomon, who I'm actually going to start us off with this because I feel like there is one pretty common comp a lot of people have been given to this player, and it's Bryce Huff, who is now of the Eagles. Undersized guy, 6'1". He's a small edge. He's something you don't see very often, but he's got extremely long arms. And he's not somebody who's going to be an every down player. Obviously, with that size, you can't play in the NFL as a 6'1" edge rusher for every play and the size that he's at. I'm not sure what his weight's exactly at, but it's not something that's going to scare you. So he's a player that you turn on tape. He led the FBS in sacks with 16 for Troy, and obviously he's in the MAC. It's a conference with less talent, but when you look at how he plays, he wins with a lot of different moves, and he's talented. He can do things for you, and he can kind of be that designated pass rusher who you can plug in on third down, and you can win with. And to me, there's value to be had in that, especially for I think it was a 5th or 6th round pick. That's extremely good value. Like you want to aim for that 10% pressure rate. You want a guy who's going to come in and pressure the quarterback. I feel like Javon Solomon can do that. He's going to compete with Kingsley Jonathan for that role. I think he'll make the team. And, obviously with the Von Miller situation being what it is, you needed to at least add another body in that area. They did with Smoot and him. So they're trying to beef up the depth at least in that group as well as the linebacker because, you can't rely on the health of all these players forever. So, Ryan, what'd you think of Javon Solomon? He's obviously an intriguing pick. He's a polarizing player. So let's hear your take on it.
Yeah, as I said, once you get this far down the board, you're just throwing darts at a dartboard and seeing what sticks. And for the same reason so many people love Mo Kamara in this class, the guy out of Colorado State, you can love Solomon. Wins with speed and quickness, had elite college production. We're talking about a guy who was second in all of college football in sacks. The difference, though, between Mo Kamara and Javon Solomon, obviously Javon played at Troy, a little bit lower level of competition in the Sun Belt rather than Colorado State. But Solomon is a year and a half younger, and the biggest knock on Mo Kamara was his arm length. He had 30th percentile length arms there, where Solomon actually has really long arms for defensive ends, 90th percentile. So I think you're getting a guy who has a lot of traits to be a really good pass rusher in this league. Overall, though, I kind of scratch my head when I look at it because I personally wanted more of a 3-down player at this point to add to the defensive end room, a guy who can kind of eat up rundowns for Von Miller, AJ Epinesa, and Greg Rousseau. But he's a guy who can get after the pass rusher, has the tools to do that. So it's a project, and I can't really hate it. But I question where his impact is in year one, because you want some other guys, more veteran pass rushers, getting after the passer.
Yeah, Trent, what did you have for us on this pick? Obviously, a player who can't play every down, but he's intriguing. So what do you got?
I think this is honestly going to be. This might also be another steal because at the end of the day, I mean, yes, you would like veteran pass rushers, guys who moves. Ultimately, though, I think in a league where everyone's starting to realize athleticism plays a big factor in how fast you get to the edge. Yes, this is not a guy who's going to be playing second and 4 downs. He's going to be playing third and it's passing downs. But yes, he's small. You also have a 6'8" defensive end that probably be playing on the other side of him. And we talk about like Dave Walker, kind of like the same bow of defensive ends. I mean, Khalil Mack has shown you don't have to play at Wisconsin, at Alabama or Georgia to be good. If anything, the fact that he's shown up on the radar at such a small school shows you that he's the only guy on the field that matters on that defense. He's the only guy that matters. When you game plan for smaller schools like that, you see a guy that's that dominant, you have to game plan for him. The fact he was that dominant shows that this guy is really good. Like, we go back to Khalil Mack at UB. Like, Khalil Mack, a defensive end, Khalil Mack carried a UB Bulls team from being completely trash to almost being Ohio State. So I really like this pick. I really, really like this pick. And I think that it adds something the Bills don't have, which is consistent pass rush. How many times do we watch the Bills where it comes down to it and the Bills don't have pass rush? Like
Right.
Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes, you name a quarterback. If they need a pass rush, it feels like in the playoffs, it disappears. So that's when guys get a little more grabby. The fact that he's got long arms and speed helps a ton. And I think this will be a good pick for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you just said, especially the part with the inconsistent pass rushing. Like it's hurt the Bills so many times. They have to just keep adding bodies there. Really, I mean, that's all you can do. And obviously, they hoped that Von Miller would solve a lot of that. And obviously, in the first half of his first season with the Bills, he was solving a lot of those issues. But ever since the injury and a lot of the stuff that's gone on with him, it's been a problem that's reared its ugly head back in the way of the Bills. So he's again this player I really like. So I think we're all on the same page with him, Van-Pran, and a couple other players. We all kind of share the similar opinions on that. So that leads me to the last pick we'll discuss. We'll kind of dissect and analyze. And that is more of just a question. I'm not asking for a grade or anything, but I'm asking for what you think, because this is a bit of an interesting process that went into this pick. And it was their 7th-round pick, I believe their last pick of the draft. And they took a player. They took a player that never played football before in Travis Clayton, who's a tackle. I believe he's 6'8". He's a really big human being. Really good athlete. Ran a 4.79 40 for a guy that size is absolutely insane. His workout blew the Bills out of the water. They felt content enough to draft him. Again, players never played football. And I want to start by saying this. The Eagles offensive line coach, Jeff Stoutland, who took Jordan Mailata, who also never played football before and is now one of the game's best tackles, said that sometimes no good habits no bad habits is better than having habits. You know what I mean? Like having no bad habits, he's just a ball of clay. You can kind of start this guy from day one. And the other thing I like about this pick, he doesn't cost a spot on the practice squad. I don't know if he goes through waivers, but he won't cost you a spot on the practice squad because he is an international player, so they get an additional a spot left on the practice squad. So that's fun. I love it. And I think, like Ryan said a few times, you have to throw darts at these guys with the highest potential, the highest ceiling. And that's what Clayton is. And, in a perfect world, and I think it's a small chance, but there is a chance where he develops and Aaron Cromer teaches this guy how to play football. We're looking at a guy who can be really, really good because he has the athletic profile to be an elite offensive lineman. Again, he's never played before. That plays a massive factor into it. But again, I like it. And a lot of people, originally when the Bills made the pick were like, oh, what are they doing? They're taking players never played football. You have to understand the process that goes into that, and I love it. I love the project. I like the experiment that they're going to try out with Clayton, and I'm not sure what you think, Ryan, but I wanted to get your take on it because it's something I think that is a very interesting thing to do, and especially in the seventh round where the hit rate's really, really low.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short and sweet. A lot of the reasons I love this pick, same reasons that you do. And it ultimately just boils down to you get an extra spot in the practice squad to really just mold this ball of clay, like you said. It's a low risk, high reward move. And I just love it. And it gives us something interesting to watch in the preseason when he straps on the helmet and gets to play some snaps. So I love it. I know you didn't want to grade, but I'm giving it an A just for that reason
Okay.
because
Yeah.
there's a high ceiling here. There's a low floor. It's a seventh round pick. Who cares? It'll be fun.
Yeah. Trent, what you got?
Yeah, a lot of the same idea that seventh round pick is very much at this point, if you can get something that's just, throw the dart. Because again, the Buffalo Bills are a Super Bowl contending team, and this draft, more I thought about it, actually was one of the things I was going to go into and never really got into is that I realized around like the third or fourth round pick that the Bills aren't going for, superstar contender. We're going for, all right, time to hit the reset button. Let's build up our depth. And this is a great depth piece you can throw right in because, again, Spencer Brown's 6'7", 6'8". He's a big guy too. So having essentially a Spencer Brown, you can just flip the on switch on and throw out there. Helps a ton if you can get that. And like is the biggest thing for me is going to be is that can he have the football knowledge? Can he build up that football itinerary to know what a pass rusher is going to do? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, athletic abilities are nice, but you got to put those to use. You got to have smart feet, smart hands. You can't that's one of the biggest things. When we curse out Spencer Brown, part of his thing is he's a big, strong guy, but if you can get the jump on him, he doesn't have fast enough feet to make up for it. So he gets burnt a lot. And that's going to be one of the biggest things if you're developing an offensive tackle is that he's got great speed going forward, but it's about his backpedal speed. Is that going to be good? Is he going to develop a good habit there? Don't go too far back. So, but again, seventh round pick, same thing with the sixth round tackle they picked. It's very much just if it works, it works. If it don't, he's on the practice squad type of guy. And who knows? I think they're still haunted by Wyatt Teller getting away from them. And I truly think it's probably one of Brandon Beane's biggest regrets. So, hey, maybe this guy be good. You never know.
So we'll go into the next thing now, and we're going to talk about our favorite picks, our least favorite picks. You kind of might have an idea already what they might be. We'll start with our favorite picks. I'm going to go down the line here, and I'm going to start with Trent. Give us your favorite pick out of all of them, and give us your reasoning for that.
I'm gonna say my favorite pick. Probably gonna go with Sedrick Van-Pran, just out of the potential that he retains and the ability of maybe being a starter for the value they got for him. I could probably make that my favorite pick of the draft. Solomon might be a close second though. So just out of value they got for those positions.
Right. And Ryan, you might share a similar thought, but who do you got as your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that this guy was the cutoff, actually. He hasn't been mentioned this podcast, and I'd be remiss if I didn't actually mention him. Daquan Hardy. This is
There you
me.
go.
I want to say Keon Coleman. I mean, it's obvious. You want to go and talk about the guy who was the number one pick and, it has a larger than life personality. But Daquan Hardy here is one of my silently, I think there's a development path for him to be a true contributor on this roster. He's very athletic. He's really a nickel corner. He's very small. He's like 5'9", 170. Really a nickel corner, but he's very athletic. He had an 88th percentile 40, 87th percentile 10-yard split, and a 99th percentile vertical. The thing is, he's just very small. He played better outside than inside, which is a little odd for a guy who's going to be a nickel corner. But I think that the plan here is this is a flyer on Taron Johnson's successor. Um, Now you're gonna think like, didn't they just extend Taron Johnson? Like, I don't think that they plan on, putting somebody else in this role. But if you look at his contract, as he's first off, he's gonna be 28 this year. But if you look at his contract, if he's cut past June 1st in 2026, the Bills get $9 million in cap savings in comparison to $1 million in dead cap. And then in 2027, it'd be $10.8 million in cap savings in comparison to $1 million in dead cap. So it's a long shot, but I think there's a development plan here for him to someday take over that role as Taron Johnson's successor. Now, before you overhype him a little bit too much, I'll say this. I think the biggest knock on him in college was playing inside the box, making tackles, and that's one of Taron Johnson's best attributes. So at 5'9", 178, not a great, success rate, I think, here to be a nickel corner because he doesn't do too well through contact and making tackles, but I think that there could be a development plan here that this guy could be a starter on this defense in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched base on this because, we're short on time. So I wasn't able to get every pick, but I did like the DeWayne Carter pick. I did. He's not going to be the same mold as a nickel corner as Taron Johnson because Taron Johnson is more of your like third linebacker. He's going to help the defense out. He tackles well and he covers well. Taron Johnson pretty much does everything well.
Taron Johnson is the starting outside linebacker for the Buffalo Bills.
Essentially, yes. And I think he is the best nickel corner in the league, personally. And I know bias might come in the way there, but I just think that the value he brings to the defense, and I don't think it can be replaced, but I do think there, like you said, there is a plan in place for DeWayne Carter. And I also think something you didn't really talk about is he does have return ability. And I think that's something they even mentioned on Embedded. He could be a punt returner. And I saw some of the clips of his movement skills on punt returns. He looked really good. He was quick. He made guys miss. And I know the traditional returners are usually, running backs, receivers, but he can really play back there. And I'm not so sure like what his hands are like because he is a corner and it's a bit different for them. But that's an interesting role to have him in. And I think definitely as a special teams player, at the very least for year one, he's going to have a good chance at making the roster. So, yeah, I like that pick. As far as my favorite pick is, I'm sure you guys know it's Cole Bishop. I talked about the fit a lot, and, I'm kind of regurgitating the same points here, but I just love his Swiss Army knife ability. They can, much like Taron Johnson, they can kind of line him up everywhere they want. And, the fact that they're going to have now Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott have kind of a chess piece at their disposal, to me, it gets me excited because it's like, okay, I looked at what the Ravens did last year, and I'm not saying the Bills are going to replicate what they did at all because the Ravens defense was awesome. They did a lot of fun things with Kyle Hamilton and their safeties. Do they repeat that with Cole Bishop? Not to that extent, but if they can kind of get some of that out of him, I'm really fascinated to see what he can do. Because if you have a piece you can use on a Travis Kelce in the playoffs, you have a piece that you can blitz off the edge as a safety. And, I'm not sure what his range is as a safety, and I'm sure time will tell. I just didn't think he was in a position at Utah where we saw too much of his range. But it's exciting, and I love that pick a lot. So that would be my favorite pick. So we got Trent going with Van-Pran. Ryan went with DeWayne Carter, and then myself, I went with Cole Bishop. So we'll flip it over now, and we'll go to our least favorite pick. I'm sure you can already guess what me and Trent will say. I'm obviously going to just throw it right out there. Ray Davis is not my favorite pick, or it's not my favorite pick at all. I didn't like it whatsoever. So you probably know what we'll say. So I'll give it over to Ryan. Who was your least favorite pick and why?
Yeah, I hate to do this. Cole Bishop. I
Oh,
look down and
man.
up I look up and down this and look, like I like the player. I don't love the value at where they took him and where I had him prior. So I really just want to stick to my conviction and what I thought on him. Rather than like looking past the draft. Like, yeah, I like the player. I think Sean McDermott's going to turn him into a dog, but like I said earlier, I was a little lower on him as a third or fourth round guy. I would have rather they moved up a few picks to take Javon Bullard. AD Mitchell went at 52, Zach Frazier went at 51, or they could have, maybe moved down a little bit. Cooper Beebe went at 73, Christian Haynes went at 81. So maybe just a little bit more of that value play rather than going with him at 60. I also like Jaden Hicks, like I said, Dorian Taylor-Demerson, guys who went in the fourth, fifth round. So it's not that I hate the pick. I just struggled to find a least favorite pick overall. And I think in my mind, where I had him previously prior to the draft on my draft board and where my convictions were before the draft, it just has to be Cole Bishop for me. But like I said earlier, I think Sean McDermott probably turns him into an absolute outstanding football player. And I think that he actually looks great in 24. So I'm excited to see him play.
Yeah, and I agree with your approach. You know, you got to stand by your gut, and I get it. But I think there was just a huge range of opinion on the player, just because I saw a lot of people that were really high on him, and I saw a majority of people that were low on him. I don't think there was a consensus opinion on him. I think he was like you said, he was someone people viewed him as a fourth round player. Some people viewed him as a second round player, like me. So and we'll agree to disagree on that. So obviously, my least favorite is Ray Davis, and simply put, as I mentioned before, I liked other options on the board, and I didn't like taking him at the spot they took him at. It's simple as that, and I feel like the Bills just kind of felt like they needed to fill a need out, and they really didn't factor in the board as much with that pick. And they may have, but I just feel like that was more out of need and a necessity than, oh, we're going to take the best football player. So I didn't like that pick. And Trent probably is going to share a lot of the same stuff here, but I'll turn it over to you. Just kind of wrap up our thoughts on Ray Davis as it being the least favorite pick for us.
Well, another thing, he transferred around like 3 different schools. So that's kind of surprising that a guy like that ended up being on the Buffalo Bills. But no, just I'm not a fan of it. Just out of like again, he's got impressive college stats, but again, college stats are college stats. Like there's nothing, that says, wow, Bills are dynamic with Ray Davis. Like this is a pick that, gives Ty Johnson a little bit of reason to show up to training camp this year. So for a fourth round pick to be we talk about value. That's just poor value. That's just poor. I don't think you're getting your money's worth with a fourth round pick being a guy that I don't think supplants Ty Johnson on this roster. So, yeah, that's my least favorite pick by far.
Yeah, and I will say I am high on Ty Johnson. I like him a lot. I think he can be an outside zone running back. He's got the speed, he's got the juice to do it. He can get involved in the receiving game, and that's everything that Ray Davis can do already. So, like you said, there's a lot of redundancy there, and that's why I don't love the pick. And we'll move on. I hope he does well. I hope he's a great player for the Bills. It's nothing personal, obviously. Like I hope he's a good pro, and I hope he does a lot of nice
Ray,
things.
if you're listening to this, don't.
It's not personal.
You do well. Cite us.
I love his story. He's had a tough childhood, and I am rooting for him. Don't get it twisted. Like I hope he does really well. It's just more of like the pick and the process that went into it, not the player.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way: if the Patriots picked him in the fourth round, we would have laughed at that too. So
right, yeah. I mean, so it's whatever. We'll move on there to the next one, and it's just kind of an overall bow on everything. It's our overall draft grades. We kind of gave the grades for all of our players. I'll give it to Ryan. Just kind of give us your overall grade, your thoughts, and just kind of your concluding analysis of the 2024 Bills draft class.
Yeah, I gave it a B plus. I think it's by no means a flashy draft. No national reporter will be talking about us at the end of the day as the winners of the 2024 draft, but I think Brandon Beane navigated the board well. You look at he moves down from 28 to 32, then moves down to 32 to 33, picked up a third round pick, picked up a fourth round pick next year, and adds a class that fills a ton of needs for this team. And you look into next year and you look at the picks that we have, and I went over them earlier, but a first round, 2 seconds, a third, 2 fourths right now, possibly another fourth. Next year will be the year where reporters talk about us and say, we won the draft and we really like this Bills class. But this year, I think this was, a class that just filled needs. And I think Brandon Beane did a good job navigating the board.
Yeah, and I agree completely. Like I just feel like every time we draft, it's like you never really project the Bills as, oh, they stole the draft. Like, I usually feel like there's a few teams that do that, and it's like Baltimore Ravens. Like, they always take like the consensus number one guy on the board, and it's like, oh my God, this team is amazing. Like, the Eagles, like, and they end up being like, it's an okay draft, but a lot of the times it's, the consensus board is very rarely always right. So, yeah, I give it a B plus as well. Again, there's one concern I had about the trade down. I was upset about it. I mean, obviously having to wait all night for them not to pick. But the process in going from 32 to 33, I know you would have saved yourself a little bit of money on the contract, but I do value that fifth year option, especially if you're going to take a receiver anyway. I know he's helping out his buddy Dan Morgan, and he gains an additional pick in the process of doing so. But I would have liked to have that fifth year option instead of the pick. If especially if Keon pans out, you have another year of cost controlled rookie deals. So I would have liked that. But other than that, I can't say many more bad things about the draft other than maybe taking Ray Davis. But yeah, I like some of the moves they made, and it wasn't nothing flashy or anything, but they solved a lot of the problems they had, and I would say they definitely upgraded the roster in a very good way. They didn't hit any home runs per se, but I think they hit a lot of doubles and hit a lot of singles and triples. So um, I like that. So Trent, I'll go to you. Give us your final grade, and then your analysis on the draft class as a whole.
I would give this a draft class B minus, C plus, probably B minus, because really, at the end of the day, this draft class wasn't designed to be, the home runs like what Ryan said. It's not exactly home runs, not big hitters. This is a draft class that was designed to fill out a lot of the questions they had on the roster. Like in years past, Brandon Beane goes in the draft with 10 draft picks. He probably leaves with 6 or 7, like, because he moves up the board and gets the guy he wants. And this year he moved back because he desperately wanted that 3rd round pick. And like, people can argue about the Chiefs thing, and you only have to play the Chiefs once in the regular season and once in the playoffs. I mean, you're not having to play them 3 times a year. So I'm not going to be overly mad about them doing that. I'm not going to overreact about them trading with the Chiefs. That to me is not a worry. I'm just a little. I think it's just going to be more so this draft class. It's going to be one of those draft classes you look back on, and you don't really. It's not. I don't think there's going to be one player that like, man, thank God we got him in that draft class. Man, this draft class says, like, this draft class is more so relaying that. Like, the best way I would say it's not a rebuild, it's a remodel. The frame, a lot of the stuff in the house is still there. It's just you knock down the old kitchen because it was getting old and the appliances were old. That the house is still the same. Josh Allen's still your quarterback. Matt Wiles still your starting linebacker. It's just, you had to get some stuff that you might have really loved that couch, and that couch, did a lot for you. But now it's old and it doesn't want to work right. So you gotta get rid of that couch. So
exactly.
And you gotta repaint the walls. Like it really this draft is going to Lowe's and buying 2 cans of paint. It's like the can of paint is Keon Coleman, and then you bought a whole bunch of drywall to fill in your house. That's what this draft is.
Yeah. I love the analogy. It's great. That's great.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I had a long time to think about that one. So
yeah, it was good. It will be on TikTok for sure. So
sick.
yeah. So the last one.
I hope for that one. Can you get like Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, like just get still images of them walking through Home Depot and throwing shit in their cart? Because that'd be great.
I will try my best.
Sweet, thanks.
This one's not draft related. We did want to touch on this very briefly. Just to move on from some of the draft talk. We're kind of in that. We're now entering the dog days of the offseason where you'll see some veteran bodies get added to compete for some spots on the roster. So the Bills signed 3 players. I think one will definitely make the roster. 2 it's kind of up in the air with, but they did sign DeWayne Smoot from Jacksonville, Chase Claypool from Miami, and Deion Jones from, I believe, he was with Carolina in his last year. So again, I guess I'll start here. Again, these are veteran additions. There's not too much to say about it, but as far as the signings go, I really like DeWayne Smoot because I think we kind of touched base on, you talked about it, Trent, like you're not going to get an every down player with Javon Solomon, or it may have been Ryan, but you're also, I think the Dwayne Smoot pick makes you feel a little bit better about that because he can kind of come in and be a run defender, be a rotational piece for a guy that rotates 7, 8 guys. And he's had like 6 straight years of 5+ sack seasons in Jacksonville. So he's always been like a mainstay, and they signed him to a relatively cheap contract. And for that kind of production, I will take it all day long. We can get into the Chase Claypool stuff. He, to me, is just like whatever. He's with Pittsburgh, he was awesome. Everybody saw the vision with him. Chicago even traded a high second-round pick for him, which ended up being the first pick of the second round. That's how much they believed in him. Just didn't work out with Chicago. Goes to Miami, kind of was the fourth option, never really stuck there. And now he finds himself in Buffalo with going to be playing with the best quarterback he's ever played with. So do they find a little bit of that Claypool? Do they find any juice left in them? I don't know. I feel like you're at the bottom of the bottle now. Like it's all gone and there's not much left there. But if you have anything left in there, it's fine. They definitely needed a guy who could stretch the field, and he's got 4.4 speed, so that's cool. He might be your fifth or sixth receiver. And then Deion Jones, who's another linebacker they're going to bring to battle with Olofoshio, Joe Anderson now, and Nick Morrow. So that'll be an intriguing little battle. We'll see who's going to make that fourth linebacker spot, because we all know Bernard, Williams, and Milano are going to be the first three. So I'll turn it over to Ryan. I haven't heard you talk much about the veteran additions. It's been a lot of draft talk between you and I. So give us kind of your take on the signings of these guys.
Yeah, I see this just as Brandon Beane really adding in veteran pieces, depth, to compete for roster spots. And you kind of talked about Chase Claypool, and I really like the idea behind this. Like he looked really good when he was with Pittsburgh, especially his rookie season. He goes to Chicago, where it's like, what was really going on in Chicago? Like there wasn't a ton of opportunity there. Like the situation wasn't good for him to succeed. Then you go to Miami, and it's like they have Waddle, they have Hill. They're never really a team that uses more than 2 or 3 wide receivers. He doesn't really even fit their mold. They like guys who are fast. They like guys who win after the catch. So it doesn't make a ton of sense. And look, is he going to be a top 3 receiver on this team next year? No, he might not even make the team. But the idea to add a guy that kind of plays like Keon, another big receiver that will compete against Matt Collins, will compete against Justin Shorter to make this roster, I really like that. And I think at the end of the day, Brandon Beane is going to spend the entire offseason. He's going to spend early next season looking to add veteran pieces to this team, whether it's a defensive player or an offensive player. I would be surprised though if it wasn't another wide receiver, and maybe that's throwing a draft pick next year with the capital that you have, or adding another veteran guy. I know you guys put a post today about Tyler Lockett, Jacoby Myers, guys of that vein that could be the perfect wide receiver 3 or 4 in this offense, and add depth if there's an injury, but also take a little pressure off guys like Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir, who are a little bit younger. So
Right.
to sum all that up, I mean, I think Beane is going to continue to do exactly what he's done when he can, and it makes a ton of sense to add veteran pieces to the roster.
Yeah, Trent, what do you have to say about the small signings they made?
Smoot, very good. Very good sign. Very sneaky, under the radar stuff that Bean's very good at. Deion Jones is maybe he's got juice left, maybe he doesn't. Let's just bring him to camp, find out. Chase Claypool pisses me off. I don't know why we're bringing this dude in. I get it. Like there's actual good reasons to bring him in, but we talk about locker room and all that. Chase Claypool's been known to just not be able to focus anytime he's been playing football. It's been his downfall, and teams he's been on have not been very good. I think I saw a stat somewhere where games he plays, teams are 6-21 in. And really, he's competing with KJ Hamler, Tyrod Shavers, Justin Shorter. He's really competing for the 4th or the 6th spot if the Bills carry 6. And I don't know why we got him personally. I think it almost would have rather taken a flyer on Ben Skronik, knowing that he was available instead of going for Chase Claypool. But Again, I'm not Brandon Bean. Maybe maybe Mitch Trubisky needs somebody to throw him in practice. I don't know. Just not a fan of that signing at all.
Yeah, I gotcha. I'm glad you threw out Ben Scarana because I am a part of the Ben Scarana hive. I mentioned on Twitter the other day I wanted him in Buffalo because he ended up getting traded to the Texans, but special teams guy, tough player. I would rather have them get a guy like that if you're going to sign a depth guy who's got a better chance at making the roster. So yeah, I totally get what you're trying to say, and yeah, so I think that pretty much covers everything. Again, I want to thank Ryan for coming on, and I'm give you a second here to kind of plug your stuff. Obviously, you did the same for me, so go ahead and just tell us where you can find all your stuff, all your podcasts, and your pages, everything. Just throw it out there.
Yeah, so we mainly work off of Twitter at BufSportsTalk, but you can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at the same at BufSportsTalk. And then the Buffalo Sports Talk podcast, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts mainly. But you can find that all over, especially at our podcast Twitter at the BST Pod. Appreciate you guys having me on. It's been fun talking the Bills. I know
Absolutely.
can't wait for the season. I mean, training camp will be here before we know it. It's already the middle of May, and that training camp talk kind of starts up in the middle of June. So that's only 2 months away.
I know.
So I can't wait for that.
I'm definitely thinking about making the trip up to St. John Fisher to go see it. So
It's a good time.
I'm excited. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us from Connecticut, Trent. It was a pleasure having both you guys on, and we'll probably do it again soon. This has been a nice little collaboration between me and Ryan. It's been awesome working with you, and obviously Trent. It's nice to have you on as always. And you guys have it. Yeah, everybody have a good day. Have a good night, and we'll see you later.
Thank you. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.